In the humble town of Nazareth, where dust mingled with dreams and the air echoed with the chisel's tap on cedar wood, lived a carpenter named Jesus. His hands bore the calluses of hard work, yet his touch was gentle. He was unlike any other. His eyes carried a depth that pierced sorrow. His smile melted the burdens of the weary, and his words, though simple, healed broken hearts. But this is not just a story of miracles. This is the story of a single soul, Ruth, and how her encounter with Jesus changed her life forever. Ruth was a widow, worn by grief and forgotten by the world. Her husband had been a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee, taken by a storm that neither prayer nor courage could calm. She had no children. Time was her only companion, and sorrow her only visitor. Each morning she walked to the marketplace, not to buy, but to feel part of the world for a brief moment before returning to the silence of her home. One morning, as she passed a crowd gathered near the town square, she heard a voice, calm, commanding, yet filled with a compassion she hadn't heard in years. A man stood beneath a fig tree, teaching a group of children and beggars. His cloak was worn, and dust clung to his sandals, yet his presence glowed like morning sunlight through clouds. She paused. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The words seemed to float to her like balm on an open wound. She stepped closer. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Her heart stopped. The man looked up. Their eyes met. It was as though he had spoken those words for her and her alone. After the crowd dispersed, Ruth lingered. Jesus approached her, not with pity, but with understanding. "Your heart is heavy, but it is not forgotten," he said softly. Tears welled in her eyes. "How do you know my sorrow?" "I see you," he replied. "Not as the world sees, but as the Father sees. He counts your tears and keeps them as treasures." She broke down. Years of buried pain poured out like a flood. Jesus did not speak further. He simply sat beside her, letting her grief run its course. From that day, Ruth followed him, not as a disciple in the formal sense, but as one of the many whose lives he gently mended, a silent witness to his love. She watched him heal the sick with a touch, restore sight with mud, and feed thousands with a few loaves and fishes. But more than that, she watched how he loved, how he embraced lepers no one would touch, how he lifted children in his arms, how he knelt to wash the feet of those who called him master. She saw how he wept. When Lazarus died, Jesus wept, not because he lacked the power to raise him, but because he shared in the sorrow of others. That moment changed Ruth. She realized then that Jesus didn't just carry power, he carried every ache of the human soul. Then came the day of darkness. The whispers began, betrayal, arrest, false accusations. Ruth heard of it all and rushed to Jerusalem, only to find herself lost in a crowd screaming for his crucifixion. Her heart cried out in protest, but her voice was drowned in the roar. She stood at a distance as the Roman soldiers mocked him, beating him until even the sun seemed to hide in shame. She watched him carry his cross, each step an agony, yet he moved forward with a purpose no man could comprehend. At Golgotha, she stood among a few women, her soul torn in two, as nails pierced his hands and feet. Blood mingled with dust. The sky turned black, the earth trembled, and a cry pierced the heavens. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." 3 days passed in unbearable grief. But on the third morning, the silence broke, not with trumpet blasts, but with whispers from the tomb. He had risen. Ruth ran with the others to find the stone rolled away and the tomb empty. The angel said, "He is not here. He is risen." Later, in the garden, she heard it again. That voice, the one that had first broken through her sorrow. "Ruth," he said, calling her by name. She fell to her knees, joy and awe flooding her soul. From that day on, Ruth became a living testament to grace. She spoke not as a preacher, but as one whose heart had been touched by the carpenter's hands. When others lost hope, she reminded them of the one who wept and rose. When others felt unloved, she told them of the Savior who saw her, really saw her, when she felt invisible. Years later, as age crept into her bones and her steps slowed, Ruth was often seen sitting under a fig tree, telling children the story of the man who changed her life. He was the light, she would say, eyes shining, not just of the world, but of my world. And when her time came, she passed quietly in her sleep, her face calm, her hands folded as if in prayer. They buried her under that fig tree, and on her grave they carved the words she often whispered with a smile. I was lost, but he found me. I was broken, but he loved me whole.